France. In March this year, he was released with an electronic tag, which allowed him to leave his house between 8:30 and 12:30 every morning. With every new target and every new location, the stakes here have grown, so that the death of a local priest in this small suburban church becomes a test of national resilience, an attack on the whole of France. In Paris, the government was left defending itself against the charge that its defence of France had failed. But was this a failure of intelligence, security or judgment, or simply the result of freedoms the country wants to protect?
Everything that can be done under the rule of law has been done. There can still be some changes, discussions. We are open to suggestions from the opposition. But you cannot protect the rule of law by rejecting rule of law.
In the Church of Notre Dame tonight, prayers have begun to honour Father Jacques Hamel and the hostages of Saint-Étienne. But faith in France's protectors is harder now, with the country divided over what protection means. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
Well, Pope Francis has said the recent series of jihadist attacks in Europe is proof that the world is, as he put it, at war. The Pope was careful to stress he didn't mean a war of religions, but rather a conflict between peoples and economic interests. He made the comments to journalists on board his plane to Poland, where he's begun his first visit.
Il mondo è in guerra a pezzi.
The world is at war, in pieces. There was the war of 1914 with its methods, then the big war of 1939 to 1945, and now this. It is not organic. Organized, yes, but not organic. But it is war.
Non è tanto organica, forse. Organizzata sì, ma organica, dico. Ma è guerra.
This holy priest, who died at the very moment in which he offered the prayer for peace, is one, but how many Christians? How many more innocent people? How many more children will die?
Ma quanti cristiani? Quanti innocenti? Quanti bambini?
Well, let's go to Krakow and speak to our correspondent, Adam Easton. Adam, strong words from a very sombre Pope Francis, but he was very keen to point out he didn't mean there's a war between religions.
I think what he wanted to point out was to actually call a spade a spade. He said often terror attacks, the word used, he said, is insecurity. And he said, well, that's not the correct word. The word we should be using is war. So I think he wanted to highlight the severity, the gravity of the situation that the world is facing. He later came back afterwards and said that he wasn't referring about a religious war. He said that all world religions want peace. So the assumption would be that the people who carry out these terror attacks are not true believers of their faiths. And as you said, in the clip we just heard, he talked about some of the more general causes of conflict, be they competition for scarce resources, be they competition for land and domination and for power. A little bit later, he gave a speech in front of the Polish president and the Polish bishops in the beautiful, magnificent Gothic Royal Wawel Castle. He didn't refer to terror attacks there, but he did refer to the consequences of conflict, of war. And he made a rather pointed comment to the host, the Polish host. He said that not only society and churches, but states should do more to welcome refugees, asylum seekers, people fleeing war and hunger. And that, to say that in front of the Polish authorities is quite something, of course, because the Polish authorities have made it clear that they are not interested in taking any Muslim refugees or asylum seekers. And that is also pretty much largely the opinion of the majority of Polish society. So rather pointed remarks to be made by the Pope in his first speech after he arrived in his host country.
Adam, thanks very much. Adam Easton there in Krakow in Poland. Well, another reminder today that most of so-called Islamic State's victims are in the Middle East rather than Europe. Around 50 people were killed after a truck bomb, which IS says it planted, exploded in the predominantly Kurdish town of Qamishli in northern Syria. The BBC's Yogita Limay reports from Beirut.
Even before they understand what's hit them, another explosion. A fuel tank blows up, triggered by the bomb that went off near a Kurdish local government building. There used to be shops, homes, and a busy street here. Dozens have been killed in the worst terrorist attack this city has seen.
We lost 3 from my family, from my cousin. 2 of them, they are doctors. And we are like most of the family, they are living here. Most of the family, they are lost their members here.
The impact of the explosion damaged homes more than half a kilometre away. It's the worst terrorist attack this city has seen. More than 100 have been injured. Ghassan was in her house when the explosion occurred.
When I looked at myself, I saw blood on my hands. Then my son came rushing out of the bathroom and asked me how I was. I said, I don't know, and I wasn't sure if his wife had been killed. As for the rest, they were being pulled out by others. I don't know if they are dead or alive.
So-called Islamic State has said it was behind the attack. Qamishli is a mainly Kurdish city near the border with Turkey. The Kurds are battling Islamic State across northern Syria. Backed by the US and along with some Arab forces, a major offensive has been on to regain control of the town of Manbij. And IS say the attack in Qamishli is retaliation for it. Yogita Limay, BBC News, Beirut.
Well, we managed to get through to freelance journalist Bashir Talat. He was at the scene of the blast in Qamishli.
A local police officer, they told me they can't stop this kind of the attack. It's happened everywhere, not just here, even other Europe. The other things, it's a lot of the sadness, but because they lost a lot of the people, you can see the huge destroyed behind you. But at the same time, they are telling ISIS cannot kill this will of the life inside us. We keep living inside this city. We will rebuilding what they are destroying now here.
Bashir Talat. Police in the east of England investigating the attempted abduction of a Royal Air Force serviceman last week have released e-fits of the 2 men they suspect were involved. The victim fought off the attackers who tried to bundle him into a vehicle as he was jogging outside an airbase. Police said both attackers were of Middle Eastern appearance. Our correspondent Robert Hall reports.
Were you in this area between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m?
It was an incident which lasted less than a minute, but which has led to another day of intense activity on the lanes of Norfolk. The focus has been on these faces, created from the memories of the young serviceman who ran for his life a week ago. Investigators believe someone from the RAF community may have seen the men as they prepared or fled from their attempted abduction. The serviceman has told police that he became aware of a dark vehicle, possibly a people carrier, on the other side of the road. He said in a matter of seconds a man had jumped out of that vehicle, crossed the road and grabbed him. If he hadn't reacted as he did by headbutting that man and knocking him to the ground, the outcome would have been very different. The landscape here illustrates the challenge of tracing that vehicle and its occupants. Empty farmland, quiet roads and little CCTV. That's why information from those who live and work at RAF Marham is so important. Last week's incident has added to concerns over security and personal safety. Police say the motives for this attempted abduction are still unclear.
We said last week that there was no credible evidence of it being a terrorist-related incident, but that we couldn't discount it, and that remains the same. But if it's not a terrorist-related abduction, attempted abduction, the question is what else is it? And I'm looking at other possibilities. So could this be a case of mistaken identity? Could this be something entirely unconnected?
Norfolk police are in close touch with anti-terrorism specialists, but they believe key information will emerge locally. They've warned anyone spotting the suspects to dial 999 immediately. Robert Hall, BBC News at RAF Marham.
A look at some of the day's other news stories. The man who tried to assassinate the former US President Ronald Reagan is to be released from a psychiatric hospital after 35 years. John Hinckley Jr. injured Mr. Reagan and 3 others when he opened fire on them outside the Washington Hilton Hotel in 1981. Hinckley was found not guilty on grounds of insanity. The judge said Hinckley poses no danger. Prosecutors in the US city of Baltimore have dropped charges against 3 police officers still facing trial over the death last year of Freddie Gray, a black man who was critically injured while in a police van. Freddie Gray's death fueled perceptions of police brutality towards African Americans and sparked the worst protests seen in Baltimore in decades. The former French Foreign Minister Michel Barnier has been appointed by the European Commission to negotiate with Britain over Brexit. In a tweet, Mr. Barnier said he was honoured to be appointed to the role. The European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said he wanted an experienced politician for this difficult job. In November, American voters will be making a choice. Some are choosing between Republican and Democrat. Others are choosing between what they describe to us as the lesser of 2 evils. Hillary Clinton may have made history as the first woman to be the presidential nominee for a major party, but many Democrats backing Bernie Sanders have told us they think Clinton is part of the problem and not the solution. On the Republican side, some have told us they want anyone but Trump. It's left a large share of American voters feeling disappointed, if not angry, at the options for their next leader.
I'm probably going to vote for Hillary, but I'd rather not have to. I wish that there were more options and there's actually more representative of what people want and not a lesser than 2 evils situation.
If the best that we can do for people that are going to represent us as leaders are Donald J. Trump and Hillary Rodham Clinton, I think we can absolutely do better.
Maybe being involved within the Washington world for so long, I think that can kind of have a bit of a dehumanizing effect after a while, in that it doesn't seem like she really has the ability or feels like she has the ability to think for herself as a person. And so I think that when she's just trying to cater to what can and can't be done, that there isn't going to be any of the real change that we need as a country right now.
I guess she's really the only person to vote for now. I mean, once the Republican Party chose Trump, I mean, who else are you going to vote for?
I mean, as a woman, it's definitely a step in the right direction. I truly believe it's anything but Trump, but that's just me.
I think Hillary Clinton is a better choice for sure. She wouldn't be my first choice.
I'd rather have Bernie personally, but Hillary it is. Anyone but Trump, really.
Well, the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia is about to head into day 3. I'm joined now by Michael Shearer, the Washington Bureau Chief for Time. Michael Shearer, I hope you can hear me. I hear it's quite noisy there. I just wanted to ask you, first of all, how much of a problem for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are these people who don't see anything they particularly want to vote for in either of these candidates?
It could be a big problem, but polls show that about 90% of Bernie Sanders voters in the primaries support Hillary. What's different about this convention is that a lot of the real diehard activists, the people who worked all year to get Bernie elected, are here. It's not entirely representative even of Bernie voters. That said, if this sort of anger at Hillary continues, it could be really problematic, not just for people who voted for Bernie, but for young people, minority people who Hillary has to find a way to motivate. She hasn't been able to so far this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, how unified or otherwise would you say the Democratic Party is right now? We heard jeers at Hillary Clinton's name before now in this convention.
That's right. Both parties are not very unified. I think everyone has been surprised by how ununified the Democratic Party is. I think it's still too soon to know, though, what consequences that will have. I mean, if you were watching the Republicans in Cleveland, you saw similar disunity, so it's probably going to hurt both candidates. And we have a long way to go before we get to actually knowing who's going to turn up at the polls. But what this will come down to is turnout. It's about motivating people who aren't regular voters. And if a lot of young people are listening to their friends and they're saying that Hillary is just part of some giant machine of corruption, even if they're progressives, that'll be a big problem for her.
I want to just ask you about a story that's beginning to really get some traction now, this row breaking out. Clinton's campaign spokesman saying it's the first time a major presidential candidate had encouraged a foreign power to conduct espionage against a political opponent. I'm talking about Donald Trump and what he's apparently said about Russia.
Yeah, it was a remarkable press conference this morning, and I think it's not just the Clinton campaign. I think a lot of Republicans and a lot of political observers are sort of still getting their bearings after he said it. What he said was that he has nothing to do with the hack of the Democratic National Committee. He doesn't know if Russia was behind it, but then he added that if Russian hackers could find the 30,000 emails that Hillary Clinton said she deleted because they were personal correspondence, not work correspondence, they should put them out quick. It was essentially the Republican nominee for president asking for a crime to be committed by a foreign power against the United States. It was quite a remarkable statement.
And I mean, who do you see it damaging?
You know, Donald Trump's been making remarkable statements for 6 months now, and in a lot of cases it hasn't damaged him. I don't know if this changes the race dramatically. I think it will remind people who are not yet on board with Trump why they have concerns. It will certainly play into Hillary Clinton's message on Trump, which is that he's just not prepared for the job. At the same time, I think Trump has shown that there is an anger, a frustration, a fury with the way the rules of politics are set up in this country, and that breaking them helps him, motivates his supporters. And again, he may be able to pull other people into the process by speaking like this that he hasn't been able to before. You know, the other thing to mention is that Trump often says these things with sort of a glint in his eye, almost as if he's kidding when he says it. And there's an interesting way that the whole campaign, he's gotten away with a lot of things that other candidates would never be able to get away with. I mean, he said a day after the Republican convention, the National Enquirer tabloid that is often sued for reporting falsehoods here in the United States should have won a Pulitzer Prize. He's said John McCain, the former Republican nominee, is not the kind of war hero he likes because he got captured. I mean, these are things that just would not be acceptable in any other year, but this is not any other year.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. I mean, only a day after history was made, we've got the first female presidential candidate. It's not even really top of the agenda. I mean, where are we? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, he was asked about Hillary being the first female nominee in his press conference today, and we're going to hear a lot more about that tonight with President Obama, Vice President Biden, and her vice presidential pick, Tim Kaine, speaking. So I don't think that will go away, but it's certainly a strange time.
It certainly is. Michael Shearer, thank you very much.
On both sides of the Atlantic, right?
Yeah,
yes,
indeed. Absolutely. Washington Bureau Chief there from Time, Michael Shearer. Appreciate your time. Now, as we were mentioning, Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden and Clinton's running mate Tim Kaine will be speaking in the coming hours. And as always, we'll have live updates and analysis from our team in Philadelphia. Just head to our website, bbc.com/news. Lots of content on our smartphone app as well. Now, the Russian Olympic Committee chief says international federations have approved more than 250 Russian competitors to take part in the Olympics next month. This comes despite revelations of state-sponsored doping in some sports. 108 Russians have been banned so far, including all but one of the athletics team. President Putin says medals won at Rio 2016 will be devalued and that the Games will be less of a spectacle. He made the comments at an event with Russian athletes, some of whom are facing bans.
I think that your colleagues from other leading sports countries of the world will understand that the quality of their medals will be different now. Because it's one thing to win against strong, equal competitors, and it's a different thing when you compete with someone so obviously lower in class. Such a victory has a completely different taste, if any.
Well, the man in charge of security at the Rio Olympics has told the BBC the threat of a terrorist attack is his overwhelming concern. An extra 80,000 security personnel have been brought in to patrol the streets of Rio de Janeiro and the Olympic venues. As our Brazil correspondent Wira Davis reports, there's concern that the country is a soft target for criminals.
Rio has a reputation as one of the world's most dangerous cities. Within sight of the beaches where Olympic volleyball and triathlon events will take place, armed police patrol narrow alleyways, which by night revert to the control of violent drugs gangs. They let off fireworks to let us know they're watching. After a quiet couple of years, violence has returned to many of the frontline favelas.
Rio is a much safer place today than it was 20 years ago. But even in the last year or so, in these pacified favelas, the drugs gangs have moved back in. There have been more murders and more attacks. And with the Olympic Games taking place down in the tourist areas on Copacabana Beach, there's a real concern that some of this violence could spill over during the Games themselves.
In this Olympic city, shocking numbers of innocent victims are killed in crossfire, often by police. Children are taught to dive for cover at the sound of gunfire. And petty crime invades the tourist beaches below. Police officers warn they might not be able to guarantee public safety during the Games. Welcome to hell, their stark message to visitors at Rio's International Airport.
I am not safe. I cannot guarantee my safety. We police officers are hiding our badges, our wallets, our guns, because they are being hunted.
But city and state officials say that with an extra 80,000 security personnel on the streets, Rio will be safe during the Games. But says Rio's security chief, there is one overriding concern.
For me, the biggest threat is terrorism. It always is with those big events. Brazil is not an obvious target, but we have a weakness, and it is our immense borders. So that is my #1 concern.
The BBC recently saw evidence showing just how easy it would be to infiltrate the country. More than 70 Syrian nationals able to acquire genuine Brazilian passports from crime gangs and corrupt officials. Training exercises are designed to ease concerns, but with 10,000 miles of often porous land borders, Brazil would be a soft target for anyone seeking to disrupt the Games. Rio de Janeiro is still one of the world's most beguiling cities and will provide a stunning backdrop for the Olympics. But it has an ominously dark side too. Willow Davis, BBC News, Rio.
Stunning aerial video has been released showing what's believed to be the world's deepest underwater sinkhole. Researchers in China studying the so-called blue hole in the South China Sea believe that it's 300 meters deep. The team says it looked at things like tidal water levels and temperature to work out the depth. Until now, the deepest known blue hole was Dean's Blue Hole, which is 202 meters deep, and that is in the Bahamas. Now we end on a lesson on how not to invest your money. A man from Georgia in the United States who won $3 million in a lottery has pleaded guilty to using the money to invest in a crystal meth ring. 45-year-old Ronnie Music Jr. used his windfall to buy the drugs and then supply them to others who could resell it at a profit. The local attorney described it as an unsound investment strategy. Mr. Music is expected to serve years in a federal prison. Do get in touch about any of our stories. I'm at Karen BBC. Thanks very much for watching BBC World News Today.